Welcome. Welcome to Autism Virtually. We have Jen, Corey, which is me, Scott,
Hey,
and Jack from the Bodhana group. Is that how you say it?
it's actually pronounced Bodhana. Like we always say, like the old Richie Valens song, "Oh Donna, Bodhana." That's the
Right.
easiest way to. Yep. So I sometimes I sing it as well, just if that helps for folks.
Nice. Awesome. So, and uh well, we'll get into what that is in just a second. Um, so I'll just kick it off right away with my first question, which is where you got the inspiration to start such a cool group.
Ah, well, the Bodhana Group, which just to give a brief intro for folks, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're based in York, PA. We use tabletop games, whether RPG or board, for education, capacity building, and therapy. We actually, ironically, we got the idea to move into doing gaming after our first fundraiser as a nonprofit. So when we originally started, we were all about working with victims of sexual abuse and also like child and teen persons who had perpetrated sexual abuse. That's where we had worked for like 10 plus years in facilities, and we needed money as a nonprofit because it was a tough time back in 2010. And we ran Save Against Fear, which is still to this day our annual tabletop based fundraiser. It's a 3-day game con that we run here in York. We ran it, and because we were all gamers, so we figured, like, we're not golfers, we didn't own cars or anything to auction off, so we did what we knew, which was gaming. And interestingly enough, the first year that we ran the fundraiser, Rich Thomas, who is now the chief officer for Onyx Path Publishing, he was formerly the creative director of White Wolf. He also, he's an artist that's been in the gaming. Like, he designed some of the first Magic cards ever. I believe Stuffy is the character that he is known for creating if you're a Magic player. But Rich had told us how over the years, so many people had messaged and written to White Wolf and him about how much they had worked through things like abuse and trauma and personality development and all these kinds of other things through role playing. And so even from just that first event, we started talking about, what gaming meant to us as folks within the Bodhana group and how gaming had helped us, whether it was, during our awkward teen years or, with tragedies in our lives or, what have you. And we really started to talk about how gaming was more than just fun, but how if people are getting these benefits on their own, what could it possibly mean if we then took an experienced practitioner, someone who's, a therapist, a counselor, a social worker, clinician, and we built goals into the process where we, as we say, we bring characters to life. So what you learn at the table, you can take into your real day-to-day interaction, or we find the right game for the right reasons. Where, if we want to teach, everybody uses the term social skills, but, if we want to teach socialization, whether it's cooperation, collaboration, conflict resolution, well, let's pick a game that, like Marvel Legendary. It's a great deck building game that's cooperative, and it allows for people to develop that soft skill of working together as a team just to play the game. So we don't have to do this heavy overhanded presentation of like, well, today, kids, we're going to work on reciprocal eye communication and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? We find a natural way organically through the play of the game. So this way, folks are learning, folks are growing and developing, but they don't feel like they're being talked to or taught at. They're a lot more engaging. So I would say that's where we kind of got the idea from just stories from people, in the community. And then we started not only ourselves, but talking with our friends and other professionals who were also doing this. And that kind of started us off on the road that we've been driving down. So
Yeah, that's
That's
awesome.
really
I
neat.
work as a behavioral health technician, and so we also use games, but we have to call them non-preferred tasks because we're not allowed to use the word games because I guess that's supposed to be too fun. And we'll
right.
do it on, for example, like Candyland or like not the kind of games you use, but you're right. Like we use it for turn taking, um,
Yeah.
following the rules,
Hmm.
being able to step by step,
Yep.
also being able to, handle losing sometimes in a safe way, which not all
Yeah.
of my clients are great at. I wanted to ask you, when you started this group, Jack, was it basically like you had this vision and it was you have to convince the world this is great? Or did you have a lot of support?
Um, it really it depends on who you would talk to. There were and still are to some degree a lot of folks like you were just kind of saying about, we can't say the word game because, now we're just playing. Well, play is fundamental, right? We know that every species that we've been able to identify, like animals play, babies play, adults play, like everybody plays, right? So there is always some amount of persons or groups or whatnot that are kind of, I won't say dismissive, but suspect. And I think there should be a healthy dose of skepticism because we need to make sure that what we're doing is meaningful and what we're doing is really impactful to people. So it's not just, hey, we're gonna bring a bunch of games and play for an hour to 2 hours. Like there is intent behind this. But I would say that there are some folks that want convincing, but more of what we found is there's a very supportive community around this idea, and mostly those are folks who now that we have had what like 40 plus years of Dungeons and Dragons, and as far as the role playing hobby and board gaming since Catan has been in like its emergent renaissance, right? Like board games were very popular during the 1930s. They were excessively popular again in the 1950s and 60s and in the 80s. Like, so we've had these moments where gaming has been a popular part of our culture. But I think with the advent that so many people grew up with gaming that are now in the professional sphere. I mean, we meet so many people and we get so many emails of folks who are going, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only person who thought about like using role playing or using board games until I found your group. And I'm like, no, we didn't invent this. Like there have been people who have been talking about the benefits of role playing, ever since CARPGA, which is the Committee for the Advancement of Role Playing Games. They've been in existence since like the late 70s, early 80s, and they were amongst the first to kind of call back against the satanic panic at that time, which had maligned the hobby, specifically role playing. Still folks who are like, what are you still playing them kid games for? Grow up. And I was like, no, I don't want to. I don't think I have to. Um, but we do a lot of education in a lot of ways about we'll ask things at trainings and conferences when we talk about like, well, what was your favorite board game? And people are like, oh, I really love Mousetrap. And I go, okay, saying that you actually played Mousetrap the way it was supposed to be. What skills do you think that game had? And they were like, well, patience, resilience when the trap didn't work, and there's like a natural order to things, so it's also spatial reasoning when you're building the trap, and yeah, there's a lot of soft skills and skills that are baked in just to need to play the game. So yeah, I would say that there are always folks who are going to go, I don't know. But I've said and thought that there are just as many, if not more, people who are very on board with this idea, and even a lot of folks professionally that are like, well, can we study this? Can we examine, that this is really what it's purporting to offer to people? And I'm like, yeah, I want to do research for this. I think we should make sure that it's not just, hey, we're going to play Cards Against Humanity with a bunch of teens and just see what happens. It's like, no, that's a horrible game to play with children and teens, right? I mean, yeah, it's risque and people are going to play it anyway, but let's look more foundationally. And that's kind of from a lot of those conversations with those supporters we had, that's kind of what helped frame actually a lot of our direction moving forward.
As you were talking, I was thinking about how wonderful it has been to see D&D played in like Stranger Things, the TV show, to see how it equated to what was happening in their lives, and the friendship they built from playing together. And it crossed over into, sibling relationships and different cliques, which is pretty cool. I was wondering, Scott, did you have a question?
Well, sure, yeah. Just to just kind of echo what you were saying about how there is an increased appreciation of games and gaming in several forms of society. I think it was there's some politician, might have been like John McCain or somebody, like 20 years ago, who sort of besmirched a bunch of pencil neck geeks sitting in their basements, playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it was, and this was, a fairly important politician who was basically like, it turns out there's a lot of like veterans who find a lot of bonding in that shared collective. There's an increased awareness and appreciation for the levels of therapeutic qualities that gaming can provide in society. I think that's a wonderful thing. I mean, I think everyone, as a gamer, I suppose I would be inclined to think that my hobbies are very useful and beneficial to society. But it turns out, I think there's some actual practical benefits. If I can sort of steer from the slightly more general to the slightly more specific, I was wondering about the tactile quality of games, and I'm wondering, have you seen? So a lot of games have bits. They have dice and pawns and meeples and little things we can stack and play with. And sometimes people get, that interest in fiddling with bits can be very attractive. I'm wondering a little more on the subject of gaming and autism and that intersectionality. I'm wondering if you've seen, is that a useful thing? Is that can you speak to that a little bit, I guess?
As much as I can. Yeah, I know that with it really is a like kind of a personal preference. Like we've seen, some kids and, a lot of folks who are like, it's just kind of that normal nervous fidget energy kind of a thing where, kids are stacking dice at the table. I mean, everyone
Right, yeah,
table, right?
yeah.
Or consistently rolling them, it's something, like you said, it's something tangible. It's something that, is right there. It's almost like a grounding element of sorts. I've never really seen like someone who has like a proclivity. I mean, we don't mind it at the table because, like, again, whatever somebody needs to feel comfortable at the table. I know that in some cases some games actually use that as a design element. I can't remember the title offhand, but there's a dice game, I believe it's actually called like Stacked or Stacks or something, where there are different dice, but they're all kind of molded a little bit strangely. So they might have like little slants or little angles. And the whole goal of the game is you actually roll the dice and you need to stack them according to the order that they were rolled. So it actually takes that interest in stacking and turns it into a dexterity based game mechanic. So I think that sometimes, and again, this is just the sheer number of games that are out there. There are, of course, considerations where sometimes, yes, a lot of those elements could potentially be a distraction, like kind of quote unquote messing with the components. And, I think a lot of that is really preparing the play space and preparing the players. Like, one of the things that I say a lot about whether it's role playing or board game use, a lot of people make a lot of assumptions going into the use of this type of approach with kids, teens, or adults. And they go, well, it's a board game. We set up the game, we play, and there you go. And I'm like, no, wait. There's a lot of considerations, right? There's how we teach the game, how people differently learn the game, how people enjoy the game, why people are playing the game. Like, there's so many considerations, and that's just one of them. Looking at just the amount of real estate, right, that a lot of modern board games can take up, and how personal space also then factors into a lot of this, not to mention also, making sure everybody can reach the components and making sure everybody can hear and see what's going on at the table. Like, there's a lot of individual concerns to make. So yeah, I mean, I will say I haven't really seen, at least in my experience, a whole lot of it's like we were saying before we got on, the whole individualized thing. One of the persons that we work with, I do notice that when we're learning new rules or we're playing a game that's what's called a legacy game, so the game builds as you play it. Added rules, get added to, and it makes it more complicated. And we have noticed one of the things that will happen is that he'll kind of signal when rules are getting too difficult for him by he'll repeatedly touch, grab, and release the pawns on the playing field. And we've kind of taken this, like, we don't go, no, don't do that, because obviously it's it's a self-stim for him, it's a soothe for him. So we'll instead just go, are we putting too many rules in? So we use that as kind of a signal, and we'll go, well, you could just let us know there's a lot going on that you maybe would like us to explain it. So then we're encouraging that this is what you're feeling, this is what you're sensing. We don't discourage him to touch the thing, but maybe even while he's doing it, well, while you're doing that, why don't you let us know what's going on? So he's becoming more aware of some of those cues and about getting better at communicating what's going on to other people around the table. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, because
No, that is interesting, because that's I see. So I play a lot of games. I play all kinds of games, and there's game. So there's a game, Stone Age, which is, it's a great game. There's lots of there's like 4 or 5 different types of bits. Yeah, and you can build these little things, and and I think, well, those I mean, that's really fun. It's an interesting point what you were saying about how kind of taking the cue rather than encourage or discourage people from playing with the bits, because they're just fun bits to play with.
Oh yeah.
But also just taking the cue of like, I see you are distracted, so let's refocus. Cool, yeah, let's play with bits. But also, I see you're distracted, and sort of do something with that as a social cue. That's an interesting perspective on that. Yeah.
Well, it's that, one of the things we say is that there is a layer of intentionality to this, in that, let's say that we're looking for like a creativity and expression based game. We might play Monstrosity, which is this really cool game where you're basically a paranormal sketch artist, and you have, every round there is a witness, and the witness has seen a paranormal creature. So there's all these cards of all this weird, cool art of like little monsters or robots or whatever. And you get like 2 minutes or a minute to study the picture. Then you have to put it down and you describe it to all the other players, who are then drawing what you're describing. Kind of like he was 5'5" and blah, blah, blah. And the really cool thing about, a game like that is, yeah, we use it initially to engage creativity and expression, art skills. However, a lot about this is the game, and as a gamer, you probably encountered this yourself, where people play games and what's the Yiddish word? We kibitz, right? We kibitz. We
Yeah, Kvetch and kibitz and kvetch. Yeah. Yeah.
We just talk. We just open up. We just start talking. Sometimes it's about the game. Sometimes it's about other stuff. And that goes back to, people playing bridge and euchre and pinochle, you kibitz over cards, right? But sometimes these games will provide ways for us to notice things that other activities even will not allow us to maybe observe. I have another cool story, if you don't mind, that there was an organization in Lancaster. Unfortunately, they're no longer in operation. They were called the Tommy Foundation of Lancaster, and it was a nonprofit that looked to help families who are experiencing autism, no matter what member of the family it was. And so we did a lot of work with them, and we had actually set up monthly meetups at local game stores. And we didn't brand these as like, autism board game event. It was community board game day. And we said, why don't you bring the folks over? And it was just parents with their kids, members of the community, our volunteers. We were just all just playing games together. No labels, no whatever. And it was kind of funny that we always did some kind of soft skill thing of like, we had one young man who would always bring his copy of Uno Attack, because that was like his game. And all he wanted was for everybody else to play Uno Attack. Well, as you could probably have guessed, not everybody wanted to play Uno Attack. And he was very sad that no one liked his like, right? So we were like, okay, so between everybody, we said, well, maybe if you try a game that maybe you've never played, other people might want to try a game that they've never played. So we used like this opportunity, and what we saw was he was trying new games. People were playing the game he wanted, so he was happy. They were happy. And over time, he stopped bringing Uno Attack, and he started just playing the fresh, free games. And they would say, well, you played with the same people last time. Why don't we try maybe playing with a different group? If you're comfortable. No, no hard pass on this. And it eventually turned to the fact of like, they were like, well, what are we playing? And I go, it's your turn to pick. And they go, I don't know what I want to play. And I go, well, there's a whole host of games back there. So why don't you and who haven't you picked a game with yet? So we would like partner people to go like, go get a game, agree on something you want to play. And we were learning a brand new game. And as often happens, the first time you play a game, you will probably play it wrong, or you'll find a rule that you didn't understand, right? And the look of fear on the one mother's face when I uttered the phrase, oh no, I made a mistake. I think we're going to have to start the game over. Like mom was fearing a meltdown. And in the midst of this, I went, but you know what? No one won, but no one lost. And we made a mistake. And that happens sometimes, right? And besides, and the little girl looked at me and she said, it's just a game. And
oh, that's perfect. That's
right.
great.
And mom gave me this look like, what kind of wizard are you with this magic? And I'm like, there's no magic. That's the beauty of games, right? It's no big whoop. It's a game. Now that's not everybody, right? But some of those experiences, just the play of the game leads to these other discoveries and these other kind of, like even playing Take That games, right? Where it's like, haha, Take That, like Sorry is a classic Take That game.
Yeah.
People love giving each other digs, but they don't like taking digs. Wow, is that an empathy lesson, hiding in the bushes, right? So yeah, those are just some of the ways that like that individual unique experience. I hope I didn't stray too far from the original question. Like I think that's bound to happen at some point.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I mean, and I mean that's part of why I love games and gaming anyway. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think that's part of what makes games great is we can come together and have these shared experiences and and grow as people and learn a little about each other. And yeah, definitely.
And a little bit ourselves as well.
Yeah, I learned from playing Carcassonne that I like to fill the holes that are left. It drives me nuts if there's like the cathedral piece, which could be a a win or lose game maker or
yeah.
breaker, and or the one that will cut it all off.
Mhm.
And I don't care which it is. I just want to put it into the game. If I have it, like I'm not attached to winning or losing personally, but um and I think I frustrated people when we would play together because, well, I've played a lot with Scott and he would farm. Pretty much that's how he plays to win, is farming. And I would play to fill the holes that were left. And it was just an odd mix, but I didn't know that that was like my role in the game.
Well, you know, it's very satisfying to find the one piece that's going to go in the one spot, right? So
Oh, yeah.
Carcassonne, I don't have to tell you, it's a tile placement game where we're placing these little cardboard squares out on and we're building a landscape, and it's very satisfying to draw the one piece from the bag or whatever that's going to go exactly in that one spot. That's very satisfying.
Yep.
I don't care who's going to get all the points, and I think the designers of the game, actually, the publishers, kind of understand and appreciate that as well, because some of the later expansions reward that kind of play, the through commodities
Oh, yeah.
and different, you know, strategies to either kick people off of cities that you have completed, or or snag the points, or
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah, my wife is a Carcassonne addict. We actually have, when the weather is nice, we have a nice big spacious porch with a bunch of tables and stuff on it. And often we will have Carcassonne days. Where it
oh, I
is
love that.
Sunday.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
she has like two of the Carcassonne big boxes, so she can get all the expansions. She has all the mini expansions, and she's just like, yeah, just throw all the tiles in the bag. We'll start with the river, and we'll make the river, then we'll build off the river. But yeah, they'll play for like 7 hours straight. And
That's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
in online, she was actually rated, I think, third overall on Xbox because she
No.
just played that much.
Wow.
Yeah,
Holy
yeah.
cow.
I can't play with her anymore because I don't mind losing, but there's a difference between losing and losing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just no, it's not fun anymore.
I I just got used to losing big. Between that and Seven Wonders, I'm going to lose, but I'm going to have fun while I'm playing it. Yeah, we did the same thing with all of we Scott is very good about keeping all of the expansions separate.
Yep.
But we did combine them all and play in, yeah, just a huge game similarly, and it's really fun. We did this one long tournament where we because there are so many expansions, we made the age of and used expansions, and we named them, like, you know, the catapult age or whatever it was, you know, where you
Well, we had the age of fantasy, where there's the witch and wizard and the fairy
The
and dragon,
dragon.
and yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then we had the age of
dragon is
construction, where we have the towers and bridges, and yeah, all the
I
different,
need to get
yeah.
that from you separately so I can feed that to my wife. No, I think that she would consider that fascinating to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Well,
that's
yeah, because you
awesome.
wind up, like, if you just throw everything, what we kind of realize is, if you just throw everything in an enormous bag with, because there's like 500 tiles, if you throw everything in,
Oh, yeah.
you might draw the one tile from one thing at the beginning of the game, and the only other tile in the entire game that kind of goes with it, like at the end of the game,
Right.
8 hours later. Just randomly sprinkled in with just this barrage of rules, and getting us a little more focused on. It's good to segment your rules. It's really good to kind of break things out into digestible concepts, I think.
Well, and I think that even highlights another aspect of gaming that a lot of people really don't think about it, because there are rules lawyers who are, no, this is the way the game is meant to be played and this is the way it is. And I'm like, wait a minute. The designer doesn't care. They already have your $60. So you know what I mean? Like you bought the game. There was a game that was very similar to Carcassonne called Monster Factory, and it was a game by Rio Grande. And it's like instead of building cities, you're building like this big purple monster. And it was like, of course, a cartoonish monster. So it like had like wings and horns and claws and feet and whatever. And what we would often find is, especially with younger children, they would kind of make up their own rules. And I'm like, hey, if a child is engaging and a child is having fun, why inhibit that creativity? Because that's stimulation on a completely different level now, right? Where, you know, the kid is learning the rules and they're learning to make their own rules. And who knows, that impulse may be one of the next game designers of the next era, and they're getting their first bit of practice on it. But it, again, gaming can bring so much that, you know, something again like house rules. How many people play Monopoly by the house rule of anything that you pay to utilities goes in the middle and you land on
Free parking. Yeah.
rules that no, free parking is nothing happens to you space. That's all it is, right? So yeah, even that experience of kids and folks making their own game experience is something very worthwhile, and it leads to a lot of confidence building, a lot of agency and initiative. I mean, how much do we talk about, you know, kids emerging from the pandemic with a lack of confidence or a lack of agency, or, you know, if I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. Like, how let's encourage things that work against that problem that we know a lot of folks have, right? Wow, was
Yeah,
that cool? That was a cool tangent, wasn't it?
we have more.
Yes.
Jen, I'll throw it to you in a second, but first I was just gonna say that when I love playing games, but I have always been very bad at reading the instructions. So for 20 years, Scott was the instruction person. You know, he would learn how to play and then explain to me and other people what to do. So and finding somebody to do that is pretty special too. Uh and I'm on the spectrum and I have ADHD. And that combination is like I don't know, it can be tricky for games. I've through Carcassonne and RPGs, I learned that my my time span is 5 hours. I cannot go more than 5 hours.
Which is a pretty long span. I mean,
It is pretty long.
that's pretty good.
You're
It
better
should
than
be
me.
noted.
I tap out after three and a half. I'm very severe ADHD with some bipolar thrown in. I after 3 hours, 3.5, like I am back to my 6-year-old child self in elementary school, where I'm counting the clock on the microwave and seeing how it matches with the clock on the wall, and I'm crinkling my potato chip
Yep.
bag, and I'm messing with my keys, and everybody's like, "Are you all right, Jack?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, why does Arc Nova take so long?" Like, and they're like, "You're a 50-year-old man that does this for a living." And I go, "I don't care. It's
That's just how it is. Yeah, or this is me. When it's not my turn, I'm stuck on my phone, which I
Oh
think
yeah.
we'll ask that question a little bit later.
Yep.
Jen, are you ready for a question?
Yeah, this is going back to what you were talking about. And you mentioned something about people not really understanding and making poor assumptions, especially about the autistic community. You know, my son, he's very bright. He's in college. He's a senior. He's physics. Like, I can't even like make sense of the stuff that he has to do in his classes. But he's constantly misjudged, often because of how he moves. He has to stim a lot. He walks a little bit differently. He'll like move his hands. People have always assumed, sadly, that my son has like mental slowness to him or other issues.
Right.
And I cannot tell you, I don't have enough fingers or toes for the numbers of times people have just told me, oh, well, he can't do this because A, B, and C. One is like, they needed somebody to step in to do a part for Romeo. He was like 12, and this was a kid's production. And I said, oh, my son can do it. He learns super fast. He could learn like that script in the night, you know? And she's like, well, he'd have to be able to show emotion, and he can't do that, you know, or
Whoa.
whatever. Or there's just so many, you know, things. Or at Wendy's, I had him go to ask for a hamburger we didn't have. And he just walked to the lady and said, excuse me, we're missing a hamburger. And she said, you need to go back to the end of the line like a normal person. There are so many times that he has been really not appreciated for his uniqueness. You know, people don't see an autistic kid and think, wow, that's a brilliant person. They don't see an autistic nonverbal kid who's stimming really hard to survive as having like a beautiful brain and having all these amazing thoughts, which we know they
Right.
do. So my question to you is like, do you come across that as an issue, even like with parents? Some parents may be thinking, oh, well, that's above my son. He can't talk. So, you know, like, or just putting limitations on some of your clients that you feel shouldn't be put on them. And also, Corey was going to ask about nonverbal. Do you work with nonverbal kids as well?
I would say not exclusively nonverbal, and that is predominantly because that's an area that requires a fair bit of specialty. I have in the past, part of my professional history is that I worked, like I said, for a number of years in I would say it was mostly neurotypical, but we had some neurodiversity. It was a child and adolescent treatment facility. I also worked for about 10 years in community-based settings with adults with intellectual and developmental disability. So I have worked with folks in the past who are, you know, non-traditionally communicative. Some folks who, you know, maybe they had a range of 13 to 15 different phrases, and that was kind of all that they had utilized. I know that there are adaptations when I have spoken with folks who do like speech therapy, language therapy, who do work with, like we've talked about things like in D&D, for example, you know, they make modifications. There's the D&D dyslexic character sheet. There's Braille dice. There's also, I feel, room for creative exploration. Like, you know, we talk about, you know, PEC boards and PEC books and speech, you know, text-to-speech devices to help folks. Yeah, why don't, you know, if kids playing a wizard, make their spell book a PEC book? So in the game, they could like either touch tap, you know, what they would do is, you know, I cast cone, and then it could be like fire, lightning, whatever, you know. So now we're using the game maybe to expand vocabulary also, right? So there, I think that one of the things that we always talk about within Bodhana is I will say it's not that I would not work with someone who is nonverbal. I have limited experience, so I don't feel I'm not that I'm the best person for that. We always say to work through and from our expertise. For example, I've worked with sexual abuse and trauma. I have not worked with veterans and combat-induced PTSD. It's PTSD, but they're very different sources, right? So I think that there are definitely a lot of modifications, and it's always been a principle of mine, having worked within the IDD community for as long as I have, that anyone, you know, you can make modifications as long as you are working with someone and not working on someone. I think that you can find ways to overcome whatever barriers might be there. But yeah, we're sometimes there are determinations, like, and we'll talk with the parent. We had one family that was interested in services for their child, and when they came, they wanted to do role-playing games. And we kind of said, well, let's, you know, meet everybody and let's talk about what we can do and what we're interested in. And even through the conversation, it's not that the person can't do role-playing, but some of the focus that the person had at the moment was too much of a barrier to maintain a narrative. So instead, what we're doing is we're working to that by first, we're working on board games that encourage cooperation and intercommunication. So we're practicing the way that a D&D party talks together. Then we're going to utilize games that like Cora Quest, or, where it's like a dungeon crawl. So we can then see, okay, can we construct this narrative in this adventure while we're going through a board game that is cooperative? So we're using the games, again, very structurally and intentionally to build and develop different skills while also measuring where the capacity for the person is, with the eventual goal of, yeah, narrative role play is a great thing. Now, we'll also say it's not for everybody. We've worked with some kids who just can't, like D&D role playing isn't their thing. And that's okay. Like, this is not a magic bullet that, if everybody just plays D&D, they're going to, improve in every area. That's not how this works. The same as every therapy or approach doesn't match with everybody. But I wouldn't say that we speak in terms of this person can't do that. We instead can use games to measure what the person enjoys doing and what they have the capacity, or what benchmarks they already have, and then we use games to develop upon those to launch into like more diverse and more expanded opportunity. Does that make sense the way that I answered it?
Yeah, that makes sense. But I want to go back to you had said, that you don't really feel that you're the right person, to work with nonverbal kids in this way because you don't have a lot of experience doing that. And perhaps it's just my experience as a single mom of an autistic son. But if I had to say I had a mantra, it is, if not me, then who? Like, you have this great group, and there's so many amazing kids who do struggle with their words, and some may not even use them, and they may struggle with their focus, or one of the things they'll say, like, autism is children playing incorrectly with toys, like lining them up or whatever. But what it truly is they're just playing in a different way, in an unexpected way. And I can understand why that might be complicated when you're playing these games that are very complex and they have to be played a certain way. But I would just encourage you to consider, perhaps, if not you, then who's going to be working with these nonverbal kids, and believing that they can do this, and working through how to do that. At AV, like, I believe that there needed to be this platform where parents could get information, because when my son was diagnosed, it was like, hey, he's autistic. Don't expect that much from him. See ya. And that was it. There was no like OTs, SPs, nobody talking to me, no behavioral therapists. Like, I knew nothing. And I felt we really needed a space where we could have that. And I couldn't find one. And so I trying to make one myself, like, because if I don't do it, I'm not great at it. Like, I'm not a great interviewer. I have a hard time staying on topic. But if I don't do it, then who's going to do it? It's not going to get done. So I would just encourage you to think, perhaps moving forward, that even if you're uncomfortable doing something, because
it's
uncomfortable,
not,
you know what I mean? Like, just, I don't know. Like,
it's not discomfort. Yeah. If I can just clarify that, it's not discomfort at all. It's, I know that there are certain approaches that I have not yet had experience doing. We're not opposed at that, absolutely. And there's tons of other, because I know a lot of professionals who are trained in aut play. I know a lot of professionals who are DIR floor time instructors. Like, so I converse and, speak with a lot of those folks, and I will make referrals in a lot of cases if I feel that someone is above my expertise. So yeah, there are definitely professionals that I know of and partner with, and myself, I'd be more than willing to do that, and I would get that professional. So I didn't want to make that sound as if I was unwilling. We haven't had much referral in that area, and that might be awareness. Who knows? But
yeah, that probably is awareness. And I don't mean to make you feel like, I'm talking like, for me, like, I'm uncomfortable doing a lot of things, but I do it anyways. I know I don't mean to do them great, but at least there's something out there. we're putting it out there. So for me, like, if not me, then who? And I do think you're right. I don't think there's a lot of awareness. And one of my questions was, as I asked, like, do you ever find that parents kind of have a glass ceiling? Because I can go back even with my son,
Yes.
and see some places I have this glass ceiling, like, oh, well, I don't think my kiddo can do that because of A, B, or C. Like, oh, they were terrible with this at school, and they kind of are like looking at you like you're nuts, saying, oh, I believe that they can
Yeah.
beat that. Like, do you see any of that from even the parents?
We do sometimes encounter that, because again, what you had just said, it's kind of, it's hard to teach a person or expect a person to swim if they're in a Burger King, right? Like, and people sometimes overgeneralize these things. Well, they can't do this here, or they don't do this here, and I'm like, hold on, because we found with like one of our folks, people are like, well, autistics, and I hate when people a lot of times start that sentence that way when they go, well, they're not very good with reading social cues or knowing emotions or feeling emotions or, stepping into someone else's role. And they'll go, well, theory of mind. And I go, stop. So we've seen in like one young man who was very much a wallflower, did not at all, like, he didn't emote a lot, he didn't discuss a lot. And even when he asked general questions, he's very quiet. He doesn't open up a lot in that aspect. But when we say, what does your character do? He goes into like drama mode where he'll get up from his seat and he'll move around the room, like showing us what his character does. And I say, okay, so in some aspects, maybe that's not how he feels comfortable, but we have no problem getting him to emote. It's just we now phrase it in what would your character do, as opposed to what would you, the person, do? Because he's a huge, and other parents are like, well, my child is very obsessed with anime, and I go, well, there's a reason the person really likes anime. Can we unpack that, right? So yeah, I don't blame parents in that regard, because I think that a lot of misunderstandings. I mean, people are like, well, this new autism thing, and no, actually, that term's been around for quite some time. Do a little bit of research, not just on Facebook. Uh, and I think that a lot of people have, through either media representation or when we didn't know, or I would even go further to say we didn't bother to investigate appropriate supports because it was difficult. People have been given this false idea of what a person can or cannot do, where if people are just given resources and given support and understanding, people can accomplish a ton, right? There are sometimes real world limitations, but we shouldn't impose those, because sometimes the nature of how we experience any sort of diagnosis or condition or whatnot is already sometimes limiting on it in and of itself, right? So yeah, unfortunately we've seen that, but on the other hand, I think because we use such a creative modality or approach, I think that it allows for us to see growth in an area that is not as traditional. Like, we'll say, well, so and so doesn't really engage people or want to talk to people. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, so they're in a role-playing game group with us. Not only are we going to teach them and work on goals and skills and whatnot through role-playing, but let's teach, maybe if the kid is interested, how to be a game master. So then we say, okay, so you know how to be a game master. How did that feel? And they go, that was pretty cool. And we've had this situation, like one of the young men I was mentioning in our group, he wanted to learn how to be a game master. And we said, all right, dude, we're going to teach you how to be a game master and how to make your own story and how to run for people. And the first time that he ran it, it was like a one-man show, right? Where it was very much, he had a story, it was in his mind, this is what was going to happen, and he was running it for his peers, and we kind of took a seat back, and we were players ourselves as facilitators. And at one point, one of the other kids in the game like turns to me and he goes, are we going to get to do anything, or is he just telling us the story? And I said, you're allowed to give feedback to your peer. It's not me. you're asking him how to play in his game. And so the first time that he did this, it did not go as well as one might expect. But I can remember my first time being a GM and how
Yeah, I was gonna
hard
say it's
it,
very common to jamming is hard. You
yeah.
have all these ideas about how your game's gonna go, and sometimes
And then your
that's
players just rip it all to shreds, right?
yeah,
So
right.
so he took
So
feedback from the group and he realigned it. And the next time that he did it with the feedback, and again, I'm going to say that I believe very much in a concept that I was taught working IDD that we call the dignity of failure. And I can't consider myself as succeeding if I never had the chance to fail. Because what did I accomplish if you literally rolled the mat out for me? Like, what are you doing? So when this young man was allowed to, quote unquote, fail at doing this, he asked for open feedback from the group. And they said, we didn't feel like you were really listening to us or changing the game based on what, like, we didn't feel we could do anything. And he went, I understand. Like, he was very like, he took it all in and he was very like, okay, I hear you. Thank you. And he was digesting everything. So 6 months later, when he ran, it was like a totally different GM. He was using, and again, I'm going to talk about this in terms of like capacities. He was using active listening. He was changing routine. It wasn't his story, it was their story. He was changing the plot based on what the players were doing. And they were like, dude, what did you do? And he was like, you gave me feedback and I used your feedback. Like he was like, why are you surprised? You told me what to change and I changed it. And even his mom was like, this is amazing. Look at what you've done. And I go, no, no, that's not my victory. That's his victory. Because he took that interest and that passion of gaming and he used it in a way that worked on so many skills that if you would try to do that through like a workbook or a worksheet or like, these non-creative engaging activities that people try to use, the game provides a platform that, now we could say, we'll start a game club at your school or start one at your local game store. Now we're talking about building natural support systems as opposed to just purely insular support communities, which neither are better or worse than the other, but they offer different things, So I think that when we have encountered that, we found a lot of very surprised parents like, oh my God, I just caught my child. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did you catch them doing? They were in a Zoom call. Okay, I don't know what the emergency is. They were in a Zoom call with the role-playing game group talking about strategy. And I was like, so what's the surprise? He set up the meeting with other people on his own. And I go, yeah, imagine that. If you leave someone to their own devices and they're motivated, right? And again, I say this jokingly and we're all kind of having a giggle, but imagine that surprise of a parent going, I didn't know my child could do this. And, we talk a lot in our engagement about, we have helicopter parents, right? Which hover over and, and that's, yeah, there's a lot of concerns that we have, right? But there's other things like, have you ever heard of the concept of a lawnmower parent? Which is a lawnmower parent is someone who mows the difficult grass in front of the person so they don't have to struggle, right? Part of that struggle, it is natural to not want that person to struggle, but our own struggles, I say we all make mistakes. That's why they put rubber in the ends of pencils. And we don't want people to fail catastrophically, but sometimes that allowance for failure, and even within the world of the game, because it's a game, it's not as serious. So it allows for failure in a very safe environment. Like if I ask a character out in a role-playing game on a date and they say no, who cares? It's a game. But I'm still going through the same mental practice of asking that person and maybe feeling those nerves. So I'm practicing things in this kind of consequence-free environment that also then helps me maybe experience things I would not have. And, there's just so much that gaming provides. But yeah, I totally get it. Why, parents being frustrated sometimes or not knowing what to do. I mean, like you said, Jennifer, like just that example of no one giving those resources, that can be very frustrating. So I never blame a parent for that. but I love bringing them along where, that just let's see what happens. Let's not force it. Let's just see what develops. And that's also a lot of like that experiential, be with the person while they're going on that journey, because that's when we're going to find out more about who they are, what they like, what they don't like, and how they do or don't do things.
Yeah, I was laughing mostly because it's very relatable. Um, in what I've heard and witnessed. My own mom is like the kind of the well, she was very protective overall, but I feel like she overestimates what I can do. Sometimes I have to be like, well, no, I can't. Well, I guess I can see the look on Scott's face. It might depend upon the activity, but she she's like, what do you mean you can't do this? This is,
Well, I mean, I often say, like, I'm 50 years old. I was an asthmatic child. I was a smoker for 20 years. And I'm 50. I have some limitations. Like my window on being an astronaut probably past, that's okay. Or like my ADHD, I can very easily get overwhelmed emotionally or procedurally by what happens. That doesn't mean I can't, but it means on certain days I might not be as able. And I think it's healthy to recognize challenges, but not how do I always say it? Like, I know I have challenges because of my ADHD and my bipolar. When I allow that challenge to become an impediment,
mm-hmm.
yeah, I can realize there are certain things like Magic the Gathering. For whatever reason, my brain does not like that game. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. It's just there's too much. There's too many options, too many sets of cards to play. That is a limitation that my brain gets overwhelmed. And I go, it's too much. I don't know. But I make that choice. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's always a tough. I mean, I'll fully admit I am not a parent. I don't have any children except the fuzzy kind who you'll see here and there through the video. But yeah, that it's difficult to navigate that. And thankfully we found that with gaming it provides that opportunity for seeing things that you might not otherwise see because of the engagement of play. So it's really encouraging.
Yeah, I just went back to school at Full Sail, and one of the first classes that we take is the psychology of play, which I thought was just fascinating and really fun. And the idea that we're supposed to be incorporating play into everything we do.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not everything is going to be fun, but that
I
spark,
mean,
that spirit.
taxes are, just plain old doing your taxes is it's just a game, right? You just have to figure out
Yeah.
you just have to follow the rules and put the things in. I don't happen to like that particular game system, but it's just a game.
You might, if you like,
Dungeons and
yeah,
Dragons, taxes and tariffs, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
I have a question about fantasy.
Sure.
Some of the I'm on the spectrum, but also have worked with people on the spectrum and with other different abilities. And I like fantasy. That's just kind of built into my personality, but I've noticed some of them didn't like fantasy, don't like the concepts, maybe don't understand. Would you pick I know there are so many different RPGs, but would you pick one that didn't have that, or would you adapt something like D&D and take the, just make it more sciency? What do you
Um,
recommend?
no, excellent question. There's actually a presentation that we've done now we've done it at Gen Con, we've done it at PAX Unplugged, and it's called Therapeutic RPG Isn't Just D&D. Now I totally understand. I mean, I'm wearing the hockey jersey, but D&D is the most ubiquitous system. Most people know it. They attribute role-playing to D&D, right? I mean, I got my set over there on the shelf, you can't see. But we have long realized that for multiple different reasons, like the selection of a system is very, very important. Initially, truth be told, D&D is not my favorite role-playing game in the universe. It is literally the first one I ever touched and got my hands on. I'm not a fantasy guy by trade. I am much more an X-Files, Buffy, like Scooby-Doo, you know, kind of like I love Supernatural. I love the Call of Cthulhu role-playing system since I started playing. I think a 3rd edition is when I found it. And we find that, you know, there are kids that don't like fantasy. So we actually utilize about 15 different systems and more, because there's always new ones coming out. And sometimes it's the genre of the system that we use. So, you know, if someone wants to role play in the 1940s crime era, yeah, we can use Gangbusters. That's literally a gangster role-playing game, right? Or we can do an Old West role-playing game, or we could do sci-fi, we could do horror, we could do superheroes, right? So genre's one. We also know that different role-playing game systems have different rules that and different things to the system itself that can add to what you're trying to incorporate in whatever you're doing for a group. So for example, there's a role-playing game system called Kids on Bikes, which is from Renegade Game Studios, Doug Lewandowski and John Gilmore. Now, since then, there's now Teens in Space, Kids on Brooms, some multiple genres. But one of the things that we like about Kids on Bikes is when you make characters in the game, you answer relationship questions. So it's no longer is it the old D&D like, oh, you're all just trustworthy adventurers who've never met each other who are suspiciously in the same tavern, and now you're gonna risk your life with somebody else. No, it's Stranger Things, the role-playing game. You're all kids in a small town. You design the town together. You talk about the rumors of the town, the landmarks of the town. So you make your own place collaboratively. But then these questions might be, do you know somebody? Yes or no? Okay, if I know them, do you know them favorably or do you know them unfavorably? And it might be, you know, what did this person do to you that you would never forgive them for? So not only does that give the group a reason to bond together, but from a skill building perspective, I love relationship questions, because now we get to work through some interpersonal things, and maybe you'll share some of your feelings about something you went through and build it into your character. So I think that different role-playing game systems offer different opportunities. The Doctor Who role-playing game, for example, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. In that role-playing game, the character with the least violent resolution suggestion goes first in the initiative order. Why? Because the Doctor does not believe in violence. So
I love that touch. Yeah, that's a
right?
great mechanism. I love that.
It's just so cool. And even look at Doctor Who. I can do fantasy in Doctor Who. I can do straight sci-fi. I can do horror. You can do multiple genres. So it literally is finding the right game for the right reason, because I could even use a game like Golden Sky Stories, which is a Japanese import game, and there's no combat mechanic. The game doesn't focus on combat at all. It's all about, you're an animal spirit called a henge. It's a Japanese like animal that can kind of turn part human, but like you might have fox ears or something. And it's all about helping other people. And the whole game is about the relationships you have with other characters that drives the economy of what you can do in the game. And it's all about helping people. It's a really cool game that if you're working on maybe anger management, anger resolution, nonviolent confrontation skills, you can use a game like that to teach things, but you're still just playing a game and having fun. So no, that's an excellent question about genre, because again, I'm a bad nerd. I don't like Firefly, I don't like Game of Thrones, and I don't like The Walking Dead. So sue me. I still love Star Trek, Star Wars.
I'm with you on all of those.
They're okay, you know.
Some of my favorite RPGs were just one shots that were in Doctor Who, Warehouse 13. I have a Farscape book I've never used, but I
Nice.
would still love to go and play. But like I I love acting. I love that emotional, or for some reason my special thing is people and emotions and learning what they are and how to use them. And um so like to go to into a D&D game where people are focused on um fighting and was difficult. So my most successful play was fighters that would just kind of just go berserk. um but I guess now that I'm saying it out loud, probably because it's so unlike myself, but that was the only way I could really like get into it, and it was very difficult, and I had trouble. Like short term I could do it. Again, my limit was 5 hours. um and then maybe 5 weeks. So I didn't want to have like an endless game. It was painful. Trying to explain, and now I have some more knowledge about myself and the world and other people, but I didn't have any ability to explain it to others either.
And
um,
there's a lot of good systems out there that are pure storytelling. One I might want to recommend to you, since you love storytelling and acting, it's a game called Savage Sisters. And it's a storytelling game where you play as an all-female tribe, and you develop like rules for the tribe, and then literally it's you're all around the fire. And I believe it's called the godmother, or I'm sorry to ninth level games if I butchered that, but you basically are like, let me tell you the stories of our people, and you're telling like stories of the tribe and its history that all correlate to like these values you've picked. But it's a pure storytelling game that's just really, really cool. And it uses a very basic system called the polymorph system that they designed. So yeah, ninth level games, it's Savage Sisters. It's incredible. And if you like polymorph, they have Rebel Scum, or Die Rebel Scum, which is a Star Wars one. And they have Mazes, which is like a D&D Osric game. Like they have a lot. Also, there's an upcoming game for kids called Venture Society, which is like cool animal, persons going on friendly adventures. And it was written by some associates of ours in Jersey. So yeah, great stuff that's out there that's definitely will fit that storytelling urge that you have.
Yeah, I think of course ninth level is probably best known for Kobolds Ate My Baby.
Correct.
All hail King Torg. But
Oh, hell, King Torg!
there you go. Yeah, no, they do cool stuff. I just recently played, got a chance to play test an as yet unpublished game from them. No, but I was going to say actually that I appreciate how there's there in more recent years there's so many excellent more independent story driven game concepts. For the Queen or Quiet Year is phenomenal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where we're just building a world or telling a story, or and a lot of these wind up being one shots, or you can use them as a foundation to then go play the next thing.
Yep.
You could build a world in the Quiet Year, and play artifacts from Mousehole Press. Jack Harrison has done some really cool little one shots where he just sort of takes apart this one specific aspect of a game. Tell the story of this magic weapon or artifact, and
Huh.
these very interesting concepts.
I just wrote
Yeah.
that title down. It's very rare that I hear a role-playing system or a game that I haven't heard of.
Ah,
So I was like, ooh, Artifact, that sounds very
yeah.
cool. It's like
Art,
microscope.
yeah, artifact with an E.
Oh,
He also
okay.
did, I think, Bucket of Bolts is a similar concept, but in space and telling the story of a particular spaceship, the Bucket of Bolts. A couple others. They also published The Slow Knife, which is another interesting name. Yeah. These are all just narrative. Tell the story of this weird aspect
Yeah.
of something.
Which is good, because then it's not a lot of complicated rules if someone's worried
Exactly.
about that engagement. Because role playing, speaking of the awareness piece that we talked about earlier, Jen, I think a lot of people are afraid of role playing because they think it's like this secretive, esoteric, like, well, but if I don't know, how can I get into it? And it's like, no, there's many entry points to role playing. There are very rules-like games. There are even GM-less games where no one's in charge and you're sharing the story around the table, and it's literally just collaborative storytelling, which is put as much of it in as you want, and as you get more comfortable, you put more in. So yeah, there's a lot that can bring people in.
That's awesome. I have a question. So my son, if you're familiar with this, and probably Scott is as well, there's something called the Mafia Syndicate online. Have you heard of that? My son plays the Mafia. Corey, you haven't heard of it?
Is it a
Well,
text-based thing?
Well, it is it's a game, right? And my son told me he learned most of his social skills from this game. So there's a person who creates a story, right? So it's kind of like a GM, like you're talking about. And then you have townies and the mafia, but you don't know who's on the other side. So you got to try to take
See,
out and guess
Mm-hmm,
which is which. And then either the townies will win or the mafia will win. But like you have to be able to manipulate the situation. You have to be able to like gauge what that person is thinking, like how likely is it that this person knows what I am, or how sure am I that this person is not on my team. It's actually, I was hoping maybe you actually knew a lot about that. My son
That
plays
sounds like
that.
werewolf, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Yeah,
it sounds like
werewolf,
Ultimate Werewolf, which is, it's very similar. There's werewolves in town and there's werewolves and villagers, and I mean it's somewhat of a morbid game really in some aspect, because every night the werewolves eat a villager. Kind of,
Mafia
they
does the
pick,
same,
yep,
yeah. They
and
take
but
So
every
so the
yeah,
game
go
was
ahead.
originally invented as Mafia, and then it was rethemed. It was invented
or
in
the other
the
way, maybe.
80s.
Yeah.
No,
I'm not
it was invented as Mafia, and it has been rethemed as Werewolf by some other people, and it's been published as Are You a Werewolf by Looney Labs, and The Werewolves of Miller's Hollow,
Yeah, Ultimate
and
Werewolf by Ben
Ultimate by
Alsbach.
Bezier Games.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Bezier,
yeah.
yep.
Mhm,
Then they
mhm.
have One
Yeah.
Night Werewolf, One Night Vampire, One Night Superhero,
Yeah,
One Night
yeah.
Alien.
And it's kind of
So it's,
expanded from there. Yeah.
yeah, and there's tons of social deduction games as well, like The Menace
Mhm,
Among Us, The Thing, Outpost 31. Like there's a ton of games that use that
Two
principle
Rooms and a
of,
Boom. Yeah.
yep, yeah, it's a great, like, again, a great way to learn to like read tells and to try to pick up on who's being deceptive or whatnot. It's, and again, you, like you said earlier, people go, oh well, an autistic would never be good at this game. I'm not so sure about that. Like,
Yeah, he won an award. Like they give out awards every year, and he won like one of them for being like the best villager or townie in a game or whatever. Because he saved everybody when like they were gonna lose. He did something brilliant.
That's awesome.
I don't know, who knows? But yeah, but there's also like things online, and he did that himself. Like you said, when your child, teen, or whatever finds something they're motivated to do, they will like amaze you with what they can do on their own. But yeah, that's a really cool thing. And like it helped my son a lot, and it's something you can do online. You don't have to have a therapist or a friend even do it with you. It's something you can for and do yourself. So it's really cool. Like in this day and age, like not only can you do it like with people like you, but like a football jock could go online and be really like secretly love love role-playing games, you know?
Yeah, I mean, really, a lot of folks can gain a lot of these benefits. Like when we talk about it from the Bodhana perspective, it is, we want to maybe help set up different interventions or different games, like to help in a more directed way. But a lot of folks, and I encourage everybody, we just figure you're not a board gamer because we maybe haven't found the right game for you, because there's so many different games out there, and board, card, dice, they're all considered tabletop now. So yeah, I think one of the biggest struggles that we've noticed from a lot of folks who have come to us and reached out to us is other people's stigma about autism, where we don't want that person at our table because they're afraid that they'll melt down, or they're afraid that this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you really need this is why that, like I said, that ASD at your FLGS, which is your friendly local game store, it's a training that a presentation that we offer for free for local game stores, or for people about, like I said, it demystifies autism, so people don't have these, well, it's all about social skills. No, it isn't. It is for some people. For other people, it's about praxis. For other people, it's about overstimulation. They don't like it. I'm like, no, we don't use that language. Like, some people may be sensitive to audio stimulus or visual stimulus. Not everybody. It's about learning people, not a diagnosis.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, people make a lot of assumptions of things my son can't do, when he can do so much. And I think that's like probably the hardest thing for him. He just accepts that there's just this level of garbage he's just gonna have to take just for being who he is. Like, it's heartbreaking in some ways,
In a lot
but
of
it's
ways.
also awesome in the way that I find that my son tends to be like magnets to other kids like him. So he's able to find like a group, and they play games. That's what we have, like a Thursday night game night, and they meet every Thursday. Then video games, board games, whatever,
Yeah.
and it's what helps them connect. And they've created relationships just based on food and gaming. And they're really great friends now. So games
Yeah.
are an amazing way to bring people together, for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of stealing one of your questions, Jen. The question was, do you ever let clients win? Do you want to give some background about that with you and your son?
Yeah, I was gonna let that one go. But yeah, like I don't know if it's because I'm just so competitive, but I never let my son win at anything. Even before like his diagnosis, like Candyland, it didn't matter. Whatever game we played, like I played to win, even if he was going to like cry because it was like the 10th time in a row I'd won, I couldn't just like give him one. But it's funny, now he's an adult and he whips me. Like, I used to be able to kick his butt at Just Dance and Mario Kart. I was like a queen. He destroys me. It's not even close. Like, I'm back in 11th place online. He's constantly coming in first. It's disgusting. But he feels really good about that win, and I feel really good about it. But even for my clients, I've never thrown a game. So I was wondering, have you ever thrown a game?
Board games, no. Because board games are very tight. Then here's the breakdown that we use. Like, board games are typically not therapeutic in the way of like working on anxiety or depression or things of that nature. Board games are more, we're working on critical thinking, creativity, expression, cooperation, stuff like that. So no, in board games, I've never thrown. I'm also, because it again, it's resilience. Now I will say that there are times where I maybe have shaved off some hit points on an enemy. I don't like when characters die in a role-playing game, especially, it depends on the audience. If they're teenagers, and I know that, what's that phrase, that people that play stupid games get stupid prizes or whatever. Yeah, if you're going to constantly run where the archers are firing, hey, that's kind of on you if you're a teen. And now, if you're a kid and you're just learning how to play the game, no, we're not gonna have like a pile of dead bards sitting in front. If you're a fan of gamers, I think I got Scott on that one. But this idea of letting someone win it is well because it's tough for them to lose. That resilience is probably tied more to success and than anything. When we talk about emotional intelligence, when we talk about social intelligence, that idea to not succeed but to try again is crucial to success and independence. So no, in terms of board games, I have never thrown a board game ever. Have I altered roles? Yeah, of course. That's why we use a screen. Every GM does that. That's no secret. But I would also say that a lot of that lends itself to what the goals are. If a goal is that, a kid is very set that, well, this is what I want, so this is what's always going to happen. And if it doesn't, there's going to be heck to pay. Sorry, not at my table. That's one of the goals that we've all agreed that we're going to work on. Part of that is dealing with frustration. Part of that is dealing with failure or perceived failure. And we've had some really cool moments around the table. Like one night we were having an RPG session and a very young man at one of our tables. The dice were not his friend that night. The dice did not like him. He could not hit a goblin to save his life. And he broke down at the table. He was, noticeably, he was visibly upset. He was crying. And we paused the game. We were like, what's going on? And he was just like, I can't help the party and I can't do anything. And I was like, well, you didn't hit any monsters, but team, was he helpful? And one of the other players was like, man, I went down when all those arrows shot me and you healed me. So that was awesome. And I go, so maybe always hitting the bad guy isn't the only good thing that we can do as part of a party, right? And he goes, well, it's just like at school when I don't get my work done and I can't do this. So we were talking, and I then talked to the parent about this ideology of like perfection and academic performance and stress levels. So like I said earlier, an in-game moment where if I would have just every time he hit, he would not have had that moment connecting what was going on in the game with this overall level of frustration and how we needed to work on more stress management skills. So the game provided a vehicle, as I say, it's the way we get the clay that we work on in clinical practice. You don't know what to work on until the issue presents itself, right? That's beyond the DSM. Well, according to the stats, you should have this. This is it. No, there's tons of things about ADHD that I do not have, and there's a ton that I do. But that's even changed over time as I've done mindfulness meditation and all the medication I took over the years. So I think on purpose, we do not throw the game because part of learning, is when you play with other people, you're not always going to win, because that's also a good social engagement, right? Being a good loser as well as a good winner.
Absolutely. And I am a great winner. But thank you so much. I feel no guilt now because I've been carrying that around with me.
No,
I
I
was
think
teaching him resilience.
yeah, I think that's great, Jen. I don't so most of my game playing, my serious game playing was, from my 20s till now. I'm 46, and most of that was spent with Scott gaming. So I forgot where I was going completely. Which is, my ADHD. A squirrel.
Yep. I use the same phrase.
Yeah.
Squirrel.
I was laughing though when you were talking about the player who runs into the arrows, because that is something I would do. Like if my character can use its last 3 hit points to distract the big monster so the other players can get it, I'm probably gonna go for it and see what happens.
I mean, there is an economy of actions, of hit points, of the bad guy can only throw out so much damage to so many people, and if someone's going to go down anyway, then there is a strategy to
And
that. That's a
re-rolling a
kind of
character is like one of my favorite parts. So
It's the best part of learning a role-playing game. It's the first thing you do to learn the system. It's make a character. And even
yeah.
then, there's so much we could talk about how building a character in a role-playing game reflects who you are and what your goals are and what you want to run. I mean, there's so much we could go into on that.
You mentioned that Bodhana was creating a RPG.
Yes, we are currently well, we have submitted our draft of the rules. It's a game called Branch Riders, and we have been picked up for publishing by Onyx Path. And the whole thrust of Branch Riders is we wanted to design a system that would make it easier for therapists, clinicians, or parents to run meaningful stories that could help work on, like, capacity building and clinical goals if they're using it as a practitioner, or even educators. So what we did was we built this whole storyline where you are a branch rider. It's kind of like a weird special missions force of sorts that goes to one of 8 distinct realms that are all separated by a barrier. And the reason that they're separated is because the enemy is the blight, and it's this kind of mindless but malevolent force that goes and just wants to create chaos. So what you do as a team is you go into these different realms and you have to investigate what the blight is up to, what's going on. But we wanted to also make it that when you go to do things in these realms, you just can't punch the blight in the face all the time, because the blight can represent hubris oriented pride, or overzealous competition, or self-esteem. It can represent all of these, all of our human foibles. So instead, you use your combination of an approach, which is our answer to attributes. So instead of using strength, dexterity, intelligence, and all that, we say that you could be forceful, which could be aggressive or assertive. You could be knowledgeable. You could be observant. You could be social. Or we decided to throw in creative. If in D&D or any other role-playing game, you want to do something that GM's like, I don't know what the heck to score that as. We go, well, it's a creative approach. It's something outside the box, right? And you combine your approach with one of your techniques, which could be a skill or a gift. And the gift is like a ability that you bring from your other realm. Then you have an approach die, which is your situation. And that represents how strong the blight is in that incurrence. So those 3 dice are rolled, and they're normally between D4 and D10. And any roll of 4 or higher is a success. And we use a very simple resolution mechanic. 3 successes is a yes and, 2 successes is a yes. 1 is either a yes but or a no but, and 0 successes is a no and. So it's very narrative. And each of the realms are a combination of a genre with some type of skill building approach or concept. So, for example, we have the Heights, which is a superhero realm, but it's all about social interaction. So it's superheroes if the entire world was run on social media. So you, as a superhero or supervillain, are obsessed with light, and you want fans because that leads to sponsorship. But we've also built into the world that, like, not everyone has superpowers. So we can then talk about ism and, how do we treat people that don't have superpowers, or how far will we go to get someone to like us? So you can build some of these things into the fabric of the narrative creatively. And we built 8 different worlds. Sci-fi, steampunk, pulp noir, superhero, old west. It's just a ton of fun. We're doing play tests here and there. We will hopefully be running play tests at Origins, hopefully this weekend at Unpub as well. If we can find some extra space, we'll be in Maryland at the Unpub 2023 this weekend. And we're hoping to kickstart Branch Riders at this year's Save Against Fear, which will be November 10th through the 12th in New York, PA this year. So yeah, we're very excited about our system. It's all proprietary, and we have like a lot of cool surprises. And yeah, so please just keep following us and watching for updates as we go through.
That sounds amazing.
That is really cool. Yeah.
I think we're heading towards conclusion. I'll ask my last question, and then if Jen and Scott have another question to end, they can have a chance. I haven't done a lot of gaming since the pandemic started. Like out and about. I'm stuck on my World of Warcraft and my phone games, or my Ticket to Ride app. But like where would you suggest a person should start to reemerge in the world?
There's actually a lot of cool options out there. One of my first, like, if you're not familiar with the hobby and you're kind of nervous about getting into it, I'd actually recommend a resource called boardgamearena.com. BGA is a great online resource. You can get a free membership for some of the games, but it at the most, I think it only costs as much as $4 a month, and you get access to like well over 700-800 games. And the cool thing about that is they've actually like scripted the games. So when you go to play them, like it's not like Tabletop Simulator or one of those where like you have to move all the pieces and stuff yourself. Like it literally is like the app that you said you have for Ticket to Ride. It's scripted like a game, and it'll set it up for you so you can learn the rules and become confident and comfortable with them. You can also engage other people socially. You can invite friends who are on BGA to play in games, and they have video chat rooms. They have regular audio chat rooms, so you can even socialize online if that's your preference. We always recommend friend groups first if you're kind of nervous about the hobby. However, there are a lot of friendly local game stores. Hopefully, you have one in your area. A lot of times, game stores will have libraries that you can try, staff that are willing to help you and teach you. And jokingly, there is nothing a board gamer loves more than to introduce someone to a game that they love. You know, it's just as true as we always joke. If you ever want to like throw away 3 hours of free time, just ask a role player to tell you about their favorite character, and they will at great length. But I mean, in other ways, it's kind of like we've seen a lot of people build up. So you start with, your friend circle and your friend group, and then you go maybe into a game store. Conventions are a great way also to discover a lot of games because there's always play tests of new games that are coming out. There are always independent designers. It's one of the main reasons we love going to Unpub. These are all games that have been unpublished. So some of them are like, hey, I wrote all these things down on index cards, and this is kind of what it's going to look like. And some of them are, hey, we're looking to kickstart in 6 months or 3 months. Tell us what you think, I would say don't be afraid of the hobby. It does seem intimidating at first, especially like, Scott had said about fiddly bits all the way to before. Like when I looked at my first Fantasy Flight game, I about fainted because I was like, what is all of this crap for? Like, why? But now I'm like, ooh, Frosthaven, yeah. How many more components can I get, right? Because once you learn what they're for and you start playing the games, they do get progressively easier. But it's also okay to know your limits. If a game like Ark Nova is not your game, find a group that's respectful of that doesn't force you to play things you don't like. I don't particularly care much for a lot of Euro games. I like creative fluff games. I don't care if there's more theme and luck than strategy. That's just how I play. But then I find people who think the way that I do in a game store. It's also a great way to find other players. So that's what I would recommend. And kind of the same for role playing.
Yeah. Jen, have you ever played an RPG?
I'm more of like a Save the World PlayStation 4. I wish I had a PlayStation 5. The next Final Fantasy is coming out. I can't afford a PlayStation 5. I'm dying. It looks so awesome. Like, I love RPGs, like the Japanese RPG, classic RPGs, where you have like your people,
Nice.
you know, and you have to save the world. And then I get to where I almost save the world and I stop because then they'll be over. Like, there's very few RPGs I actually have beaten, and that says a lot about them. Usually, if I actually like see it through to the end, but I'd say probably 80% I have gotten to the boss, and I'm like, I just can't. It cannot be over.
I can't play JRPGs anymore. I used to play them incessantly. I just don't have the patience anymore to play turn-based RPGs. It has to be like Kingdom Hearts. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was cool. Okay, so I have my last question, right? But before I do that, here's my doodle.
Oh, nice.
Doodles. She's autistic. Not, but she's been showing her
Nice.
doodles. So there you go. There's it says GBA. I don't know if you could BGA, GB. Is it BGA or GBA?
It's actually the full title, boardgamearena.com.
Okay, well, I'm
Yeah,
definitely gonna check it out because I think that's really cool. My group here would love to pick up some of those games. So here's my question. Okay.
Uh-oh.
It could be a book, a series, it could be a television series, it could be manga, it could be a movie, whatever. Favorite, either of those things about games. I'm gonna start. Alice in Borderland. Love it. Hugely love it. It's based on a manga. I don't know if you've seen it, but like that is my favorite game oriented anything. Passing it around, Scott. What do you think?
Favorite, like,
It could be
story, culture, concept
could be
thing.
anything. Could be movie, television series.
Well, you know, my favorite game is Carcassonne. We were talking about Carcassonne, and you know, it's my favorite. But I don't know that there's too many stories or culture about it.
You should make some.
Maybe I should. Maybe I should.
Oh, yeah,
Okay. So here's an obscure thing that can probably what my second or third favorite game probably is game Volcano, played with Looney Pyramids. Anyway, the publisher, Andy Looney wrote a book called The Empty City, in which it's sort of is both inspired by and inspired some of, sort of in the middle of a lot of his game creation. The Empty City by Andy Looney. It's sort of about a world where people play games everywhere. It's this prevalent cultural thing that people sort of do. It's a very fantastical sort of world, but it put me in a cool headspace for a while I was reading it. So there you go, The Empty City by Andy Looney.
Awesome. Wrote it down. Gonna look into it. That sounds really cool. Okay, Corey.
This is such a hard question. I guess I'll go with Wizard of Oz because it has so many themes and relatability of character. Like the concepts are simple but relatable in different ways, and I've liked the musical, the movie. We have some pretty cheesy board games that are based on it, but they're fun, and you know, like branching off into some other concepts like the witch, the good witch, the bad witch, and different
Yeah, definitely. That was a movie that you could kind of felt like a board game, you know, like different levels, you know,
yeah,
to get to the end,
Definitely a rolling
to
go.
beat the boss. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, Jack, what do you think?
Oh boy. I would have to say overall, I would mention in terms of like a property, that I like because I don't really consume a lot of like I don't read fiction anymore. All I read are Buddhist thought books, therapy books, and role playing game books. That's all I read anymore. I get sleepy when I read fiction, even though I love fiction. That's my ADHD, I guess. But I would have to say, in terms of a game property that I am absolutely in love with, and it's a game that many people may not have heard of. It's called Pugmire, and the game of Pugmire, it's a role-playing setting that is published by Onyx Path. Main designer is Eddie Webb, and there is the Realms of Pugmire, the Monarchies of Mao, Pirates of Pugmire, Squeaks in the Deep. It's basically it's our world in the future, and mankind went away. We don't know why. It's never explained in the book, but animals, specifically like dogs, cats, birds, rats, whatever, they built culture after they became uplifted. So it's kind of a post-apocalyptic thing, but it's also in a fantasy setting. So it's like D&D dogs and D&D cat. And it's an adorable system. It uses basically, 5e light rules. And it just successfully kickstarted its second edition. But I have loved this series because I love the point of engagement where people can play as their own house pets and make their own animal as a character. Kids especially love it. It's family friendly. But I love, because I'm a huge Thunder the Barbarian fan from back in the day of these fantasy adventures all happening in their like New York subways, or like I turn an old game store into a dungeon crawl. Like it's just weird adventures that you can write. So I would say that, the Realms of Pugmire, and there are some fictions that are out about that, but it's just such an interesting world to play in. That is one that I would recommend hands down to anyone looking for something unique and engaging.
Awesome.
Cool.
That sounds really cool. Okay, Scott, your last question.
My last question. Well, I had a question about phones, but we kind of talked about that a little bit. I think distractions and concepts and stuff. Well, here's a nice nice put a nice ribbon on the whole thing. And maybe you just answered this. Favorite game? What is your favorite game? Maybe that's what Pugmire is. Maybe your favorite. I don't know.
Well,
what do you think?
That's one of my favorite role-playing systems currently. I would say
Mhm.
that my favorite RPG of all time is probably the Ghostbusters RPG from West
Oh
End Games.
wow! Holy cow!
It
All right.
was published in 1986, and as you can see, like I said, in our intro, I always have the Ghostbusters behind me. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen it over 400 times. My screen for my Ghostbusters 86 set is autographed by Dan Aykroyd. And I actually have original box sets of Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters International. The international one is still sealed from 1989. I haven't even cracked it yet. I liked it because it was a great intro system. It takes 5 minutes to make a character. It's a real simple, it's a dice pool mechanic. It was the first game system to use a dice pool. It's all six-siders. It's humorous. It's kind of beer and pretzels. But it was my intro to the hobby by way of a property that I absolutely loved and adored, which is why, in reference to the earlier question Corey asked, why I believe so much in finding the right game for the right reason. So it spirited my love of role playing and kept it going. I still run Ghostbusters. I ran a session for Jasper's Game Day a number of years ago for their charity. I run these at conventions. I even use the modified version of the system in Bodhana trainings that we run on how to use role-playing games and board games in intentional application. So I will never not love that game. I actually always keep one of my original Ghost Die, which was a special thing that they made. You can see the fading Ghost Pip there, but
Oh man, that's
this
awesome.
is one of the original six-siders from back in the day. They're worth like $200 online to get one in like good condition. So yeah, that's probably one of my favorites of all time. I love it and I still
magnificent.
play it.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's fantastic.
What's your favorite game, Scott?
Well, Carcassonne, as I was just saying, Carcassonne is my favorite game. Is a thing that I say, not because it's the game that I want to play all the time, not because it's this amazing, like the pinnacle of all games. No, I love it so much because my gamer friends say it's kind of light and it's a little fluffy, and my non-gamer friends say they think it's really complex and there's all these things and I don't even know. So that to me feels like it really is right in the middle. Like everyone can kind of play it. Everyone can kind of, and with there's a bunch of expansions and there's all kinds of different rules we can kind of pick and choose. And we can just kind of say, listen, we're not going to use the farming rules. We're just going to build roads and cities, and we're just going to play a nice friendly game. Or we can pull out all kinds of extra bits and play a epic mega game that lasts 4 weekends. It really strikes that really great middle ground. It's a pretty good game, but it hits all of the right buttons for me. It's a fantastic game. I really like it. So there you go.
Yeah.
Jen, do you have another game or
This moment makes me think of, do you remember like in Sesame Street, they'd have one of these things doesn't get, and it was like 4 things. One of these things doesn't.
Oh, right, because we're
That's this moment right now. I'm the one that doesn't belong. I don't have like a great answer, but my favorite game is actually SkipBo. It's a card game. I know I'm like so dumbing.
Oh no, that's great.
No,
Yeah,
SkipBo is a
yeah,
great
yeah,
game.
Counting
yeah.
like 1 to 12, so simple, and it takes some strategy. Like we have different like home rules, like about what do you do when you get stuck. Like we have it, so you can play it. Like I just love it. I don't know. That is my favorite game. I'm also very lucky at it. I used to win all the time, but now I usually don't win. I was mentioning this, right? That my son has like pretty much
Yep.
taken over for the rest of our lives. Like I'll have to ask myself, was the first 15 years of his life worth like the next 75 or whatever it's going to be that I'm getting my butt handed to me? But even when I lose that game, I enjoy it. I enjoy playing it. It's my favorite game.
I like how you mentioned a Sesame Street reference, and then talked about SkipBo, which made, again, my ADHD brain, you're sick counting to 12. So then I'm like, oh, that's like the electric company that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So now I'm like,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, so we've connected Sesame Street
Totally.
to
Yeah,
the
I
electric
totally
company.
get those connections.
Yep. Oh, that's great. That was a pretty funky jam too. That whole like do 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 do.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, it was.
Do, 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 do.
And this is totally like off topic, but Gary introduced me. Like, did you ever see the Elmo? I can count to 4. I don't know if it's Elmo, but it's like one of the Muppets and it thinks, I can count to 4. I can only count to 4. From
No.
like the bodies on the floor.
No,
Oh,
I don't know.
awesome. Yeah.
I
And
know
then they
that-
have the count 1, 2.
There's actually this is intriguing because there's a metal band. They're a comedy metal band. They're called Psycho Stick. And
That might be what it came from.
Yeah, they did, because they did like a heavy metal parody of that song.
Of that. Yeah, and it's like
And
an
it's
Elmo,
like-
but not an Elmo. Like if Elmo like was, I don't know, born on the streets
Oh
and
my
ignored.
God.
for
That
his
is
whole
so
life.
funny. Yeah, it might be because they also have a
Family
song called "Obey the Beard," which is a bizarre song, but it's pretty funny. Yeah, it's wow.
I think I've heard of that one.
All right, sorry, slightly off topic.
I love tangents.
I'm gonna give my answer, which I'm also surprised I didn't think of it for the other question, which was World of Warcraft. And all of the offshoots that of lore and mythology that stuff came from. I've learned so much like backwards. I learned it from WoW and then went and learned the real stuff. The real story. Where did this come from in history or mythology or There's a lot of good stuff and original stuff too.
Yeah, Blizzard tends to pull heavily from for a wide variety of references for all the little references to quests. Like most of the quest names are like a song or
Yeah.
a book or, or something. Very very common. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah.
I still want to get a shirt that says the one shirt.
Ah,
Nice.
I saw the one that doesn't belong. So I like getting both of these things. But I've enjoyed like learning about all these games. Actually, I'm not a gamer like the way you guys are gamers, but I actually think I'm gonna check out that website. I can see like maybe I just haven't found the right game. So like the next time we talk, I'll be like the Terminator. Yeah, like I'll know
Yeah.
like everything.
It's a great way to learn games, and there's a lot of variety on the platform. Like I think Asmodee North America maybe bought it a little while ago, so they're starting to now transport more like pro titles over to it, and it's really grown in the last 3 or 4 years, partially due to the pandemic, where people wanted to board game but they couldn't get in person, so they really adapted to it. So it's a really good thing.
Is it
Awesome.
the website that you can play together? You can play together, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. It takes you through turns, it gives you prompts, and they basically have set up like you could play space base, you could play Soro, you could play King of Tokyo, you could play, there's just even some really thick, deep games you can play on that site. It's really amazing for only $4 a month.
Cool.
You could play
Well, we were
San.
Can you play SkipBo?
Yeah. SkipBo, I
Probably,
believe, is
yeah.
also on there. Yeah.
Holy
Probably.
cow! Well, take me in.
I'm
Gotta
fairly
go.
certain. Check it out just to make sure. But or if you can't find SkipBo, there might be like a clone. So
They do have a few clones. So there's there's they don't have Uno, but there is a game that's called Solo that it's basically Uno, and has slightly like a couple of slightly different cards. And it turns out when you don't have like I don't know, Uno's a fine game, but when it's if you get a few people on a Zoom call or whatever, and we're just clicking buttons real fast, the games can be very very fun, rapid fire silliness. So there you go. I think there's a bunch of games that can play that you might not be like, let's make a game night of let's play Flux. Well, you might just really like Flux or something, and that's cool. I mean, I like Flux, but you can quickly get into a silly game. Just hop into Board Game Arena and play a silly game quickly. Sometimes. It's,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, Jack. We loved learning about the Bodhana group. And thank you, Scott, for joining us as an interviewer and gamer. And do we have a sign off? We need a sign off, Jen.
We don't even have an official name yet.
Could I just real brief for anyone who wants to find out more information about us and everything that we do, we have a wealth of services that we offer. If you're local to the York area, we do run in-person RPG groups. We also are running in-person board game groups, which you can find on our site, www.thebodhanagroup.com. We also offer training and consultation for organizations that would like to start their own game-based programs. And those are both RPG and board game format. And of course, there's Save Against Fear, our game con in November. That'll be in York, PA at the Expo Center. And you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter at the Bodhana Group, on Instagram at the Bodhana Group. I think those are all of the deets. If folks want to reach out to us for any questions, we're more than available. I know I made a post in the Autism Virtually Facebook group a little while ago, and I'm always up for questions at any point. We love talking to folks about this, and we love connecting people to gaming because of all that it offers. So thank you all for the wonderful opportunity to speak on. Again, I got asked so many questions today that I do not normally get asked, and I love it. I love it. It was so very, very cool to meet all of
Well,
you.
there's so much more we could probably ask too, but
Yeah.
it leaves
Oh,
something for someone else. What your group is doing is so needed and just awe-inspiring on every level. I am
Thank you.
having trouble formulating the words, but just the thought and care that you're all undertaking. It's noted, and thank you, and go check out their website.
Bodhana, spelled like Bodhana, but Bodhana.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You can stop recording whenever you want. You'll have to trim that off.
Well, okay then.